Welcome to Accountable, where your business is our business. Hosted by David R. Peters. Today's guest is Toni Berbrick.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Accountable, the podcast for CFOs by CFOs. My name's David Peters. Welcome to our show today. You know, one thing that I have to say is that the CPA profession, no matter what you want to say about it, it's never boring. It's one of those things that is always changing. There's always seemingly something new. And I think that that's especially the case if you are a CPA who's working in industry. I mean, the needs of businesses are changing. The things that you get into on a daily basis are changing. And I think that today's topic is really evidence of that. Today, we're going to talk about cybersecurity. And our guest today is Toni Berbrick. Toni is a professor at the college level. She's an accounting professor. She is also a CPA. And she is an expert in the field of cybersecurity, and not so much from the technical IT side, but really from the accounting side, which is the side that we as CFOs have to be concerned with. So I think what I love about Toni is that she does a really good job of taking what for a lot of us tends to be a very intimidating subject matter. Cybersecurity is kind of scary to us, I think, because it's one of those things that is that we're constantly hearing about, and all the damage that has been done to companies, and how much money it has cost them because of hackers and people breaking into their systems and things like that. It's a scary thing. And one of the things that I love about Toni is that I think that she does a great job of taking what is what can be a very intimidating subject matter and making it into something that we can practically do something about. Which I think if you're the CFO, that's really what you're after. You're after an action plan. You want to know. You don't just want to know about the subject matter. You really want to know how to protect your business from whatever that particular risk is. So today, cybersecurity. So I think that this is a great topic. It's one of those things that it's a continuing conversation. Today is just one more chapter. So let's enjoy our conversation with Toni Berbrick. So Toni, one of the things that I think that you and I can agree on is that CFOs are busy. I mean, CFOs are busy people. They're spread probably too thin. I mean, if we're honest about it. Controllers are spread very thin too. This thing with cybersecurity seems like something that they should be able to pass off, right? I mean, is it?
I think so. We have so much more responsibility. You would think this would be one, especially being this, given the technical aspect, that we could rely on a technical expert for it.
Right. I mean, so I guess the first thing that sort of like comes to my mind is, why is this a CFO problem? I mean, why is this something that we need to add to their very, very long to-do list? Because it just seems like something that is sort of outside of the accounting realm, if I'm honest with you.
Right. Well, if you go back to the tenets of, CFO responsibility, they safeguard the assets.
Right.
As data has become more valuable, the risk associated with the data has become greater, and the CFOs really have to get ahead of this. Traditionally, it's been we've relied on IT to kind of share what they know about it, the extent we thought we needed to know about it, but now it's as the data becomes more complex and more sensitive, it has become a bigger risk and a greater responsibility of a CFO.
So it's not even so much that it's necessarily a technical person that has to deal with this. It's more a CFO's responsibility because the CFO's responsibility is to safeguard the assets of the company.
That's right. And even more so is we just think about the data itself and not think about an asset. But if you think about that data, a majority of our sensitive data is used to prepare our financial statements. And we're responsible for the information that goes into our financial statements as well as the integrity of that information. So therefore, it brings us down to we need to protect the data if we're going to be the ones that are saying we have this data is clean and we can rely on it.
So I would agree with that. I mean, so, and I think especially now too, it's no longer debits on the left, credits on the right for CFOs, and that's really about it, right? I mean, and if that was really ever the way, I'm not sure that it ever really was, but I do think that CFOs are being asked now more than ever to be to be more involved in kind of these systems that are processing information for the company, and a lot of that stuff is highly technical stuff now. It's not it's IT heavy, a lot more IT heavy than I think it's been maybe in the past. I think in prior conversations I've had with you, you've talked about how audits, we used to have kind of an IT person, a kind of an IT specialist that would kind of deal with IT systems.
Right.
And when that was kind of a small part of most organizations' operations, that was an easy deal. But that's not the case anymore. I mean, name a company that is not heavily data driven now.
Right. And not only that, but it's not just the data that's driven, it's the level of, it's the quantity and the quality of the data that makes it a bigger issue. And it's the expectation that our systems talk to one another. So in the past, our systems didn't talk to one another. It was, and most companies do not have, unless you're a startup, you haven't really developed your systems from day one to talk to one another. And even if you're a startup, you probably haven't because you build them along the way. So one of the problems is, companies, we have these homegrown systems that have developed methods to talk to one another over time where our programmers have helped us to do that. And now we have data that's integrated. Before we had data that was maybe downloaded into our systems, and we would do these batch updates, and now it's talking to each other at the same time. So therefore, not only we have to protect the data that's coming into our system from maybe the sales database, but also our data that's going out. So we have data going in both directions now, whereas in the past, we only had data coming in. Right.
Well, and it was also it was data, you're right, it was in one isolated system. Now everything, we try to be integrated, although I have to tell you, that's actually a pretty common complaint when I talk to CFOs, they say, well, our systems don't talk to each other.
Exactly.
But in an ideal case, I mean, we are, I think, starting to see companies that are starting to become more integrated. And because of that, it's almost impossible, I think, for a CFO to kind of pass this one off. It's something that we have to deal with, whether we want to deal with it, whether we feel that we are equipped to deal with it. We have to deal with it because it's the assets of the organization.
Yeah. And one of the things is not always just does the CFO have to take ownership. A lot of time, just like us as accountants and CPAs, we take a lot of pride in what we do over the financial statements, as well as protect them. Viciously. Nobody's coming near our domain. This is our space. IT feels the same way. And IT has an area of expertise similar to accounting where it's not generally known. So they feel that, why do I need to explain what I'm doing on my end? This is my area. This is my zone. You don't know anything about IT. So this is my shop. I got my things under control. You have your things under control. And I'll give you a report once in a while. It's a lot. Sometimes it's equally as hard to get the different departments to talk to one another as it is to get the different systems to talk to one another because we all operate in silos.
That's a great point. I mean, we're talking about some of the IT technical aspects, for lack of a better term, of this, and kind of and talking about cyber risk. But the fact is that a lot of this is it has very little to actually do with systems. It has very little to it has to do with people actually being willing to talk. CFOs, you're right. I mean, CFOs are territorial, I think, to a point. I think that IT professionals tend to be territorial, and it's for a good reason. I mean, people take pride in what they do. At least the good ones do, and and so I think that's a great point. That there is this kind of sense of pride, and part of this is that we as CFOs, as controllers, as the folks that are in charge of the financial aspects of the company, we need to be the ones that are sort of facilitating the conversations and with IT, and making sure that we understand, and that we're enabling them to do the best job possible.
Right. And another piece of that too is our responsibility reporting to the board. So when we're reporting to the board and the audit committee, it's not the IT leadership that's reporting. Generally, it's the CFO that's reporting, even on IT-related matters. So there was a study done by the Association of Fraud Examiners, and they had spoke about, they done a survey where about 40% of audit committees are specifically including cyber risks on an agenda, a standing agenda item quarterly. So we need to understand to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, so that's a ton. So 40% are including this as kind of a standing agenda item that they want to deal with. And cyber risk is also kind of unique in the sense that it is not a one and done type of a risk. You and I have talked about this a lot, and I think that truly, really until I started working at Compare.com, and where I was, heavily involved, with a website and the functioning of a website, I don't know that I appreciated that. It's one of those things that I think that we say, right? Cyber risk is always changing, and you need to always adapt. Well, okay, fine, but what, me as a CFO in my day-to-day job, what exactly does that mean? And I think that I don't know that I appreciated really what that meant until maybe a little bit further down the road, where then at that point I'm like, okay, I kind of get this now. It's not just like the hackers sort of outside of the organization. It's the fact that we have data flowing into the organization from new sources these days. We have data flowing out of the organization from new sources these days. It's protecting that data. It's also making
The type of data is a lot more complex. If you thought about 10 years ago, we would have never thought of providing our social security number or our banking information online. We weren't afraid to use our credit card online up until, maybe 5 years ago. People would never consider, shopping online and using their credit card. And so we have a lot more sensitive data, and especially with health insurance, which includes your financial data as well. They have your social security number. A lot of times, these organizations like banking institutions, insurance institutions, they are at such risk because of the type of data they have. So it's not just that it's going in and out and the volume of data has exploded, but it's also the sensitivity of that data.
Yeah, so it's not just the quantity, it's the sensitivity of it, it's the quality of that data too, Do you think that this is more of a problem now? That cybersecurity just kind of in general is more of a problem now, or is it just kind of a different problem?
I think it's a greater problem now, and I think the risk is greater. And one of the reasons is, think about our global economy. How much more is done via the internet than was in the past.
Right.
Just the fact that we have subsidiaries reporting, say you're a CFO of a corporation, you have subsidiaries reporting in and out. Then think about customers or clients that are, in a foreign country, and their systems may not be as protected as our systems, and they're communicating with one another. We also have to consider that our hackers are not just domestic. Now we have hackers that are coming internationally across borders. So the actual universe of our risk has expanded greatly with commerce being more global, our more global economy. And we have to think, since the Amazon effect alone, now a majority of our purchases are online. So a majority of our banking information, so that means all the banking institutions are taking in, hundreds of more transactions per customer in a month than they did before. So the more times that information is given to third parties and then brought into the bank, there's so many different areas of our life. Like we would have never thought that we would spend a majority of our time as accountants online during the day.
Right.
Now think about our client data that's coming in, and we can actually tap into our clients' accounting systems through the internet. We weren't able to do that in the past.
Yeah.
So then on the other side of that brings risk to our CPA firms because now we have our clients' data. So now not only do we have to protect our data, we have to protect our clients' data. So there's so many different layers of why the risk has become more complicated and why it's gotten greater than just volume.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too. Obviously we have CPAs that are going to be listening to this podcast, to this recording. This is not just kind of a problem that is isolated to bigger organizations either. I think that's and again, I think that smaller organizations, and I've sat through many presentations where they've emphasized that fact. But I'm still not sure that people, that CFOs have, and CPAs have really made that adjustment. CPAs, if you think about it, what other group keeps so much sensitive data on a regular basis? If you're doing just, tax returns, you have social security numbers, you have dates of birth, you have income, you have where the person works, you have
banking information,
tracking numbers, all sorts of things. And if you're working in audit, very similarly, you have lots of information. You may have HR information, and things like that, which would be an employee information. It really is, I think, if we could say anything, I think to, CFOs, I think, at least my message to CFOs on this particular subject is take a step back and think about all of the sensitive information that you have. And so, because I'm not sure that they realize that. That's my opinion. I'm not sure that we as an industry have necessarily done a good job of being aware of that.
And it's even difficult for a smaller organization and a smaller CPA firm to have the resources to defer to an IT department. There may be one IT guru in the firm that may also be doing, CPA type work. And we're often, kind of held victims to consultants that charge a lot of money, and we may be paying for things we don't need because we just need to learn that skill set, or we may not even know what consulting services to go out and see. So there's a learning curve.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too. Let's talk about that. So if I'm a CFO, of a smaller organization, again, my time's already stretched. I probably didn't learn about cybersecurity and data risk, in my training in school. The CPA exam is shifting, but it's not something that's really emphasized on the CPA exam either.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, give it time. But what do I do? How do I start? I guess more than anything else.
Well, first, the very first question we have to ask ourselves as CFOs is, what is our critical data? Yep. So we as CFOs know what our critical data is. We know, even as a CPA firm, we know what data is critical to running our organization and generating revenue. So if you look at which data helps us do those two things, which data do we rely on to meet our strategic objectives? So now we have cost accounting data if you're a manufacturing firm because we want to produce more so we can sell more. If we first identify what data is critical, that's the first step. Yep. And then when we identify what data is critical, then we see, okay, how is that data at risk? Who has access to that data? How often is that data updated? Are we dependent on a third-party software for that data? So those are the type of questions to ask. And then another key question is, and this is often, we spend so much time on the reactive defensive end, we don't think about the proactive things that we can do. So rather than figuring out after an incident happens, okay, now what do we do? Damage control, we are typically firefighters, and once the fire starts, and that's what ERM is all about. It's about, determining what our risk is and planning for it in advance, and figuring out how to address that risk. So we need to develop incident response plans, and we need to test them. So determine and work with the people in the organization that can help you identify, okay, if we do have an event, what is the process? What will happen? And even take it a step further before that, how are we protecting this data? So we identified our critical data. What do we have in place to protect that data? How do I know how many times somebody has come up against that firewall, or how do I know how vulnerable that is? And then let's do a drill. Okay, so just like a fire drill, let's do a drill that says this is what we need to do in the event this happens. Do we lock down our data? What do we do if we're subject to, like a CPA firm, if all your data is subject to infiltration, how do you pay your employees that still need to work? If all your payroll data is on the system, I had a university that was a client, and their data was compromised, and they had to shut down the entire system. And the first thing that they relied on was they had this external method of preparing their payroll for, a couple thousand employees, because they knew we have to continue to pay our employees. Our faculty have to continue to function. They might not be able to use the electronic methods, but we have to pay them. So we at least need to figure out how to pay them, how to pay our vendors. And the other thing that's big is purchasing. So how do we do purchasing and customer service orders if our system goes down? So you have to have some form of, backup plan, business continuity plan.
Yeah, business continuity plans. And I can tell you that, part of that is, part of building a good business continuity plan is you just think about, like you said, what are the critical risks, but also what could happen? And you sort of, and it feels like a very odd exercise on some level, because you're basically trying to figure out like the worst case scenarios. So it's like, and it almost feels like, as a CFO, you're like, oh my gosh, why am I even, considering this? But that's really what it is. I mean, you're almost trying to sort of break your own system and thinking like, okay, what could we do? We used to call it at Compare. We used to call it scenario planning. I don't know if that's actually still a term that's used or not, but we would just basically try to think about, okay, so if the website goes down, what now? Okay, what's next?
One of the things too is companies are always so focused on external threats. And there's data to show that 48% of our infiltration comes through internal parties. So that doesn't mean necessarily a disgruntled employee. That means perhaps an email got sent or received from an employee that allowed access to our systems. So it doesn't necessarily mean that our employees had ill intent. It means that they didn't protect our system like they were supposed to. And no matter how many emails we sent out about, identifying phishing scams and don't include this information, sometimes it's peer-to-peer. When you have colleagues within the same organization sending data back and forth, you don't realize that that data is still sensitive even though it's internal. And how could that be accessed?
Is that an awareness issue, do you think? I mean, is it one of those things that we just, because I'm not sure that you can necessarily, because I mean, I think that probably the Achilles heel of most internal controls is employees, right? I mean, like how do I break most internal controls? How do most internal controls break down employees? That because you still, I mean, the bottom line is that people are still people. So I guess maybe the thing to do is to make people aware of what they're sending internally, even to each other. That really that's a place to start, at least, from a training perspective. I would also say too, you talked about, identifying risk events and that kind of stuff. That's something that I think we have to train for too within our organizations, because I don't know that most of our employees necessarily know what they're looking for. It's not that they're necessarily, against, reporting a risk event, that happens, especially if it's a cybersecurity risk event. But it's like they, but they got to know what they're looking for. And I'm not sure.
A lot of times it's just explaining to your employees. It could be as simple as how many times do we click on accept cookies when we go to a website?
Yeah,
right. Sometimes,
all the time.
Yeah, right. So sometimes when you just have to read more carefully and explain to them, read what that statement says before you say accept, because or even if it's a link within an email that you're getting, and the bulk of the email is okay, but there may be some link to in order to read this data, you have to update your Adobe software. Click here to update for free. So we're like, okay, we need that data right away. Click, and then all of a sudden, you're not even aware of it. You click that button, and at the same time, you can continue on what you were doing, and behind the scenes, they're now in your system.
Right.
So it's little things like that, making our employees aware of different types. It's not as simple as somebody sending you an email that is so obviously tainted. Sometimes it's as simple as just clicking something. We're so used to just clicking yes, 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 because we're in a rush. We have billable hours. That's what we do.
Right. Well, and I think to your point, a lot of IT training on this stuff, it's not that training's not being done, but honestly, it's lousy training. It's
not a priority.
It's not a priority, and it's people checking the box, right?
Yeah.
And
it's even the supervisor saying, you know what, could you just do that so I stop hearing from HR?
Yes.
I know this is a waste of time, but you have to do it. You can't. The culture, it has to be tone at the top.
And it has to be something that I think that we as CFOs, because we're the leaders of the organization. It's that we need to step up and say to our employees that this is important and here is why, so that it becomes less of a check the box kind of an exercise. I think that would go a long way. I think also too, this is and one of the things that we talk about a lot. One of the things that I know that you talk about when you are talking, and some of the things that I talk about a lot when I'm talking for Peter's Professional Education is the risk management aspect. This is still basic risk management. That's really what this is. It's and I think sometimes we look at this as being a separate category, but we really shouldn't. It's risk management, and that's something that that we as CFOs need to be dealing with. I don't know that I ever really started off my teaching career thinking to myself, man, I'm really passionate about risk management, but I do think it's important, and and as being and being a CFO, a former CFO, it's that you deal with risk all the time.
Right, absolutely, and we're so focused on meeting our objectives, we forget that we have to manage the risk, because if we don't manage the risk, we're not going to meet our objectives. So we have to consider managing risk as part of the process of meeting our strategic objectives.
Yep, I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, I think it's also important too. We should point out. I think we would be remiss if we pointed out that there are cybersecurity policies that are out there. Mm-hmm. They can help mitigate things, but the thing is that and one of the things I typically tell clients and and folks that I'm talking with, insurance is very much reactive, right? You get reimbursed from an insurance policy after you've had an incident. It does nothing to protect you up front. And so if we're doing it, you need more than just, especially with cyber risk, it's got to be more than just, just putting an insurance policy in place and saying, I'm done. There's a lot more to it than that. We need to be doing other things. So cyber policies are good, but they're not the end point.
And that's something that we may not even have. So when I said, IT and accounting leadership have to work together and break down those silos, we also have to look at our insurance policies and call our agent and say, do we have a cyber policy? Because, when you're signing this policy, it's, difficult language to read, often voluminous and you don't have the time to go through the details. And you might see the word cyber somewhere and say, okay, I'm covered, but there isn't a standard policy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you taught me that. So talk a little bit more about what a CFO should ask their insurance agent.
Well, and the best advice that I always, because I get asked that question a lot. I mean, a lot of CFOs, they know that this is something that they need to be more on top of. They know that cybersecurity is a big issue right now. I don't think that we're going to blow anybody's mind by saying that. I mean, but it's, a lot of times people, when they're first buying cyber insurance, they just really don't know how to shop for it.
Right.
And usually what I tell them is my best advice is to be very, very blunt and honest about where your operations of your organization to your broker. So most of the time you're working with a broker, that's their job, is to find you a policy that fits your needs. Sometimes I think that we're worried about revealing too much to the broker. Don't be worried about revealing too much. I mean, you want them to know where the risks are. And so tell them about your systems, tell them about where do you collect data from? Where do you give data to clients? What are the situations that you normally have data coming out of your organization? Right. What are some things that are there certain practices that your employees do that maybe aren't the best, Right. So for example, do they send a lot of internal, sensitive information about clients internally? Are they zipping that back and forth to each other and stuff like that? That kind of stuff is things that your broker needs to know, because your broker then can go out and can look for policies that are going to fit that. And you're going to get the best price, honestly, if you do that, because I can tell you, and this is an insurance guy talking here, if for an insurance person, if you don't understand a risk, what you're going to do if you're an underwriter is you're just going to charge a premium that's high enough that you know for sure that you're going to be covered. So if I'm not sure about something, charge high, because then I know
you shoot yourself in the foot by kind of not giving them as much detail.
And so really, I think that's actually probably my best advice is that when you're buying cyber, generally speaking, more data you have, the more the more that you're going to pay in premiums. So that's another consideration there. There's usually a positive correlation there. More data it's about quantity of data, because if you think about it, that's actually the bigger risk, right? I mean, if I'm holding lots of data, I'm a bigger risk than if I'm a company holding small amounts of data.
Right.
So that's also something to share with your broker too, is what are your data policies? How long do you retain data? Do you, and honestly,
by having the agent ask you questions, you might realize that you don't have a data policy.
Right.
So sometimes the agent will help guide you in terms of ways to, deal with some of the things that you have, because they're going to ask those questions. By needing to respond, you're going to have to develop a policy to protect the data.
Yeah, and I think that's a good outcome, and that's another reason too. That's sort of a side benefit of working with a broker on a cyber policy is that they force you to think about these things that you may not necessarily think about, day to day. One of
the things that you impressed upon me was the fact that they're not standardized policies. Mm-hmm. And there's certain risks that are generally covered, and then there's other risks that will never be covered. Can you just go over that quickly?
Yeah. So, I mean, and one of the things that you and I have talked about, in other places is that, cyber insurance is still relatively new. And I'll be the first one to admit, and I've had a career in insurance, but the insurance industry is slow to move. And usually what happens is it takes a little while for policies to really become standardized, where you can basically count on certain things being in the policy. Cyber insurance is not there yet. It's getting closer. You're starting to see kind of movements by companies kind of that they're kind of finding common ground, but they're still not there yet. And so really the thing that you're looking for within the cyber policy is, one, is it going to protect? Is it going to protect in the case of an incident? Again, it's not going to do anything up front. Okay, that's where we need to have penetration testing. We need to be doing certain things kind of proactively. We need to be thinking about within our companies, how is data coming in? How is data going out? To your point, but also, but also thinking about what is not covered necessarily by a cyber policy. Could be things like, the big one is reputational risk. Because the fact is it just looks bad if you have to tell your clients, hey, your data might be compromised.
Is that something that's covered?
No, they might help you with getting a PR firm, but the PR firm is going to be helpful in some of that. But honestly, your reputation is still on the line there. You're a financial organization. Most of at least on some level. Everybody's a financial organization on some level. And so, so you're basically telling your clients, hey, your data's compromised.
It's not a fun conversation.
It's not a fun conversation. And so really, I think that, thinking about that, because there is reputational risk there, and you can read about this, basically in any paper any organization that's had a breach of security in the last 10, 15, 20 years, it takes them a little while to get back. Even today where we kind of know that this is that breaches happen,
right?
But the fact is that it still takes them a little while to kind of get back to where they were in terms of trust. Right. Getting client trust back, that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing. Yeah. And
just as it takes time to do that, it takes time to learn about this topic.
Right.
This is not one conversation that we can have and we're going to be able to impart on our listeners every piece of information they need to know. This is a continuing conversation that also needs to be enhanced by some education. It can't just be, I think I got this. Let me go talk to my IT guy, gal.
Right.
It's something that you have to continue to keep on top of and continue to learn about.
Yeah. And I think, we've barely scratched the surface today, but hopefully
we opened some eyes though.
Yeah. Hopefully we opened some eyes though. So
it was great chatting with you.
Yeah. Good to chat with you too.
Thanks for listening to Accountable. Be sure to subscribe for more interviews and insights from today's business leaders.